All right, welcome to Firm and Final. I'm your host, Mehb, and today my guest is Spencer Smith. I got to do the bow down to you, Spencer. This is great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, man. I mean, I look at a guy like you as somebody that I could learn from forever, right? I mean, like a lot of people think of me in stop loss and all that, but I look at what you've done and what you know, and if I could shadow you for like 2 weeks, man, I'd be tickled pink.
Well, I appreciate that. And I've been really excited about having you as a guest on the show. In fact, I was telling my kids about it last night. I was like, hey guys, I'm going to have Spencer on my podcast. And they're like, who's Spencer? And I tried to explain to them who you are.
Okay.
Right. And I said, Spencer is somebody who's in our industry, but he's somebody who's on the camera a lot and he's in front of people and he's got a LinkedIn page and he's got a YouTube page. And then they said, oh, so he's kind of like Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
So in my kid's mind, you are the Mr. Beast of the
I
stop
mean, if I
loss and
had one
self-funding
billionth
industry.
of his following, I guess you could say that, man. But I'll take that. The Mr. Beast of stop loss, I'll take that, man. If that's the association they have in their mind, I don't know
Yeah, that's
how true that
awesome.
is. Yeah.
That's awesome. But you're somebody who is in the public eye when it comes to our industry. And so maybe for those limited few who don't know you, just give us a little bit about your background. I'd like to get into what you do at Pareto in a little bit, but
Mhm.
I'm really curious if you could share with us and the audience your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, man. I'll do the condensed version, right? Because I've probably been in the industry 16 to 17 years now. Started in small group GA world, so nothing even related to benefits. I was in the QA and finance departments, and I like to tell the story. Ultimately, when I was paying the salespeople about 6 years in and having to report monthly and quarterly and annual quotas to our CFO, and seeing the bonus checks that were written
Yeah.
to some of them, I go, maybe I'm not in the right department. And so I started going down the path of exploring sales roles. But I've worked in, the financial analyst side at brokers. I've sold stop loss. I've wholesaled stop loss. I've actually sold software that handles the RFP process. That was my most recent gig, and got an opportunity to participate in a little bit more of a startup, which was a lot of fun. And then last but not least, I joined Pareto about a year ago. To add to your point about content, that's actually a relatively new phenomenon. I haven't been doing content for 4 years even yet. It
Yeah.
was almost an accident, and we can get into that in a moment, but this idea of, like, being public, I was anonymous up until that point, and unless you were a broker that I was calling on, nobody really knew who I was, and so I
Sure.
just didn't realize the power of content until I stumbled on making a video, like I said, about 4 years ago.
And what was the inspiration to create the video? And was there somebody you were following? Was there a book you read? What kind of gave you the inspiration to get in front of the whiteboard and hit the record button?
Well, I think the main overarching impetus is it was July of 2020, and as a salesperson, we all know what was happening. Like, you weren't meeting with people face to face, and I felt kind of stuck. Zoom hadn't really proliferated, right? What we're doing now over Riverside or Zoom, that hadn't really become common. I didn't even know what a Zoom is until a few months into the pandemic, and so I'd seen guys like Dr. Eric Bricker. If you follow me,
Yeah.
you definitely follow Dr. Eric Bricker. Andy Neary was the one that was really intentionally talking about you should be using content. And he was really just following the ultimate playbook or blueprint that Gary Vee, the
Yeah.
famous Gary Vee, had talked about for decades. He was just applying it to our industry. And so I got the notion that, well, whiteboard Dr. Bricker, he's amazing at that. I know stop loss insurance, and Andy keeps saying you should be creating content. Well, let's combine those things and let's turn it into just like I said, almost a happenstance. I just
Yeah.
go, well, stop loss 101. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. No idea what I was doing. Lighting, camera, sound, everything. I was a complete amateur, but I did it. And that video trended, I think, 3 times on LinkedIn in the top 1% of like all content on the platform. And
Yeah.
I almost go like, what is this normal? I don't have any, it didn't have any context to know how like, sort of amazing that was. And that started me down this path of reinforcing the power of doing that. And I have not stopped ever since.
That's awesome. I had a feeling you were a Gary Vee guy, and I am too. I was a big follower of Gary Vee, not so much today, but definitely like 6 or 7 years ago. It was when I was at Milliman that there was a big focus on getting content out to the market, and the medium at that time was really like writing white papers,
Okay.
and I kind of saw that as like a limited avenue, right? Like how many people are going to really take the time to
Yeah.
download and read the white paper? Like that was a path, but there's certainly other paths. And I've tried to put a microphone on the work, not a microphone, a megaphone on the work that
Yeah.
I've been doing or that others around me have been doing just to get the message out there and really use that to create content that can live forever as much as you know that already, right?
Yeah, so I was at an event on site with a solution provider. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago? And I'm in the talking to their CEO, and he's like, "Yeah, I have every account manager watch your stop loss videos that you made, 4 years ago." And so
Yeah.
it's funny that those things just continue to be out there and serve. And that's the power, really, of creating content, whether it's video or audio, is that once it's done, and it can live out there forever and precede you
Absolutely.
and serve you right without any additional effort.
It's all about scale, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think Andy calls it exponential awareness, which is one of my favorite terms. So, like, if you and I are maybe really good at our job, but we're not sort of public about it, and you have to be a little bit more willing to, like, almost toot your own horn to a degree.
Yeah.
But if you are willing to, then people become aware of you. It creates exponential awareness because all of a sudden the network effect of the way social media and things like that work. I can tell you, I think before I started creating content, I maybe had less than 1,000 followers, and now I have
Yeah.
like 10,000 and then another 8,000 connections. And it's like,
That's
that's
amazing.
all because of content, 100%.
And so I got to think you didn't think this was going to be the career path. When you were
No.
in college, what were you studying? And did you know you were going to end up in the insurance industry?
So no, definitely not. I was a soccer player first and foremost in college. Academics, I was good at academics, but they were secondary in terms of focus. So I just got, your traditional business degree. I got an exercise science degree as well, and had no idea what I was going to do, and it was purely by accident that I got recruited in. And
Yeah.
then I started realizing you can apply finance and you can apply problem solving, and there's a relationship component. And then eventually I got into sales in my 30s. But it was all, again, I can't take any credit for any sort of grand design of really anything I've done. Maybe it's
Yeah.
just sort of observe what works and look at other people that are successful where you want to be successful, emulate it in your own way. And then I've never placed emphasis on outcome. The outcome will be the outcome, whatever it is. If I enjoy the process and I love to do it and I commit to it, I presume the outcome will be positive in whatever form that takes.
Yeah, I get that, but why do you think that this is such a common theme in the insurance industry? Because rarely do you hear people went to college to study to be in this industry that we're in.
Yep.
And it's more common to hear exactly what you just said, that
Yeah.
somehow you stumble into it, you find a niche within it, and if you're persistent like some of us are, you can really build a really successful career at it.
Well, I think the biggest problem is, and part of the reason I do the podcast is to shine a light on this industry. There's some brilliant people in it.
Yeah.
High quality of life as possible. Relationship side, fun. As nerdy as that sounds, it can be fun as well. And so, what I would like to sort of do is slightly alter the perception for young people that they have on insurance as an industry. My air quotes, insurance.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot of different things. It's so multifaceted. You've got AI coming and proliferating in our industry now as well. You can literally do tech, sales, account management, accounting, finance, everything in insurance. But people kind of think of just like life insurance salesmen as insurance, and that's the
Yeah.
preconceived notion. So if we can make it seem kind of cool and attractive to the folks that might have gone into finance instead or gone into tech, and say, no, you can do all that here, and you're helping us solve a problem that's $4.5 trillion in total spend. Like, come over here and help us do it. And so if we can make that seem more attractive to high school and college kids, I would love that. I would love people to be more intentional of
Yeah.
choosing this path instead of accidentally finding themselves here.
It's interesting if you go to college and try to get a finance degree, the top tier people end up working in investment banking
Mhm.
or private equity, right?
Right.
And private equity is quickly gaining steam in our industry. Private equity buyers are buying up consulting firms, brokerages, point solutions, all types of stuff. What do you think is the role of private equity in today's insurance landscape?
I mean, I just think they see it as a growth sector, obviously, right? Those guys ultimately their job is to infuse capital, build benches, and build wealth, not only for themselves but the stakeholders in those organizations. And I just think this is the industry that it makes a lot of sense. I just mentioned the scale. it's 17.5% of our economy.
Yeah.
And so whether you like it or not, healthcare touches you, and you're going to end up being interfacing with it at some point in your career. And so I just think they look at this industry, and brokers are, if we look at just the agency side, maybe they're relatively high margin businesses. They're selling services and ideas and
Yes.
consulting. It's not labor. It's labor intensive in the human capital, but it's not. There's no hardware really. There's no like massive material
Yeah.
output, and so
Yeah.
the margins can be pretty substantial. And if you just build a decent block of business as a maybe a one-off or a mom and pop, you can have a retirement, for that block. And so I think private equity is just looking at and rolling that up, and I think they understand that this is a place to make money right now. What I would like though to see is that balanced with the actual solution side as well, because
Yeah.
if you keep building in and making a lot of money, well, that means the margins are coming from somewhere, and that means the taxpayer and the consumer are ultimately footing that bill at the end of the day. So I hope that it comes with solutions that are actually improving the output side as well, and not just making money, pumping money in.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard you say, a little while ago that this is a really fun industry, and I would
It is.
agree with you on
Yeah.
that. But every day is not roses and sunshine, right?
No.
And so, what's a part of the industry that maybe you're not such a big fan of?
Um, you know, I'll kind of stick on the financial side, and this is more my personal philosophy that it is a reflection of anybody else. But I don't like the coupling of compensation with premium, especially when it comes to health insurance and the medical side of things. I think unfortunately that coupling creates perhaps conflicts of interest in terms of outcomes, right? So if I'm a broker that gets paid by the carrier at the end of the day, the question is, are they my employer, or is the employer my employer? And then if I don't control costs and the costs go up, yet I get a raise, that looks like perhaps a misalignment of incentives. And so that's a
Sure.
thing. The industry is working, and I know you see it as working for better ways to get paid that are aligned with the employer, who is their client at the end of the day, so that it doesn't even have the semblance, perhaps, of a conflict of interest. But that has been one of the biggest things I think that has led to these cost increases and led to this long-term attachment to the fully insured vehicle, when a lot of employers probably should have moved on a long time ago. Their consultant just doesn't necessarily want that because of perhaps financial reasons.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
I
my
agree with
personal
you.
opinion. Let me make that disclaimer right now. That is my personal opinion.
Yeah, totally fine. And I think we can all see that there's like this movement on LinkedIn with individuals that are kind of banding together for that movement, that they want to see compensation removed from the decision making equation, right?
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
really shouldn't be tied to that. And it's not to say that those that are not in that army are okay with that.
Mhm.
It's almost like a necessary evil. It's part of the industry. It's the industry the way it stands today. It just suggests that there's room for change,
There's
right?
room for change, and obviously there's constraints in like the sub 50 market, right, where it's difficult, or I don't even know if it's possible to decouple your commissions. And so it sort of is what it is.
Yeah.
But I just think on balance, right, there's a continuum of optimal and suboptimal, and I would like to see, and I do agree with you, that the industry is moving towards that optimal arrangement. It can take different forms, but as long as it's more of a flat fee or a PEPM model than necessarily coupled inside as commission, you're also not, I won't bore your audience with the way that commission loads gross premium or anything like that, but you're actually doing a disservice to the employer in terms of what they pay by loading your commission in there, especially for stop loss. So I just think
I
even if people were
remember I
aware of that,
remember I peer reviewed your math on LinkedIn one
you
day. That's
did.
probably like 2 years ago that you
Yeah.
put that one out there. And so I agree with you on that
Yeah.
one.
When I got your endorsement, I was like, all right, a little feather in my cap right there.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. Now, I would say that your path here in the insurance industry is not a traditional one. I'm curious if you've had like mentorship from people that have helped you along the path here, because what you're doing is pretty different than what others have done in the insurance industry.
Well, certainly gave a shout out to the folks that I think have influenced me. And Andy, to a degree, is more than a friend than a coach, but I've worked with him in the past as well. Um, I'm flying blind here, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I really, it's some days I almost pinch myself that this is my job. I mean, I do a
Yeah.
lot of things for Pareto outside of the content that you see publicly, but I do pinch myself that like this became a job and in such a short period of time. And so, I wish I had a person that I said, that person, if you follow them, they're going to show you the way. I
Yeah.
am literally flying the plane and building it at the same time.
Yeah.
And so
Awesome.
then I look outside the industry, trust instinct. I look at social media influencers that don't have anything to do with insurance, how they've built audiences. And I go,
Yeah.
well, if I can take that and apply it here, there's no reason it can't work here as well.
Yeah. Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast, Alex Harmozy, if you follow him, brilliant guy. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
bunch of people I could list. And realistically, at the end of the day, what is the point? You create an association with something that you're good at, and
Yep.
then you learn to create awareness or attention. As long as I think that intention is pure, you represent yourself authentically and like who you actually are, not a fake version. As
Yeah.
long as you approach it that way, you can build an audience. I mean, there's a guy I follow that gets hundreds of thousands of views, and he just shows himself fixing old shoes and cobbling them into like looking good again. And it's just
Right.
fascinating. You could literally do anything. There's a guy, an Australian guy that mows lawns that are overgrown, and he does it for free so he can make videos, and he gets millions of views mowing lawns, right? So
Right.
why do I say that? You know something, anybody that's listening right now, they know something that other people are interested in knowing, and you're an expert in something. And if you're public about that and make people aware of that, now all of a sudden you can have a following too. It's not rocket science.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So speaking of that, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Pareto. Like what is your role there and how are you using this non-traditional skill set to support what it is you're doing?
Well, so I actually made a post about this, I think last week, because I've been here around a year, and the most common question I get is, "Well, what exactly do you do for Pareto?" Like that, they're as skeptical as I am sometimes that it's a
Yeah.
job, but then when I explain it, they go, "Okay, that makes sense." But so we I work together with Andrew Kavanaugh and Kate Thurston, who are, I have to give them full credit. Andrew's our CEO, Kate's our chief legal counsel. They sort of initially came to me and approached me about this idea of what you see me doing now. And then we built a role around what we thought that was going to be. And so I had to figure it out over the first year or so. And so let me give you the succinct version of that. It's everything from the podcasts you see, the social media content, whether it's written or video. It is public speaking. It is leading large scale webinars with big strategic partners of ours, and everything in between, from sales coaching to jumping on and helping close deals. The spectrum of what I am responsible for is very, very broad. But I also don't have this like, oh, you show up and this is what you do on a daily basis. I have to use my
Sure.
own instinct and lean on leadership as well. And so it's a, I think that what I described in that post, it's my job is to be a force multiplier. It's take everything else that Pareto has built over this last 12 years. Let's amplify that to help us
Yes.
grow and let our salespeople ultimately be the beneficiaries of that increased awareness publicly about what we do.
That's very cool. And so obviously there's a lot of people like you, like me, who come out onto LinkedIn
Mhm.
and push forward brand, right? And
Mhm.
so how important do you think it is today for individuals to be using like a social media platform like LinkedIn to build brand awareness for themselves personally as well as professionally for their companies?
I'm going to say it is absolute. I'd say it's mandatory. It is mandatory. But let me caveat that because you use the word brand, and I want to separate those two things. Some people will come on LinkedIn. Let's just use LinkedIn because that's the most obvious professional platform to do business on. And they hide behind their brand. They solely do the brand of the company that they work for, and everything's curated, sort of that almost cookie cutter type content that we all brands use, right? It's the stock photos and your insignia and some tagline and somebody
Sure.
smiling holding their kid, and like, what's this have to do with stop loss insurance? Who knows? But they'll hide behind that, and that can only get you so far. And so what I would say is separate but complement your company's brand from your own personal identity. And so a lot of things that I talk about, one day it could be captives, one day it could be value system as a father. All of those are, obviously trying to gain awareness for what I do, but by extension, my company benefits from that level of awareness. Because what happens? Somebody that's new into your ecosystem likes a post. They click on my profile. what is this Pareto Health thing? They click on Pareto Health. They go to the website and they go, oh, that sounds cool. You've
Yeah,
created an indirect association for your employer. But if you did, again, separate your own personal identity or personal brand from your company and make it complementary to your company, my belief is that's how you should do it, right? I think that's the way that I've been able to grow as a result. And I've also learned that. I didn't start there, but I've
yeah.
learned it by observation and experience to get there.
There's an optimal mix
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
personal and professional. And when you marry the two of them together, it could benefit you on both sides.
Both sides, but obviously you're still always a representative of your company. So,
Yeah,
I stay away from politics. I stay away from controversy. Every once in a while, I'll take a stance with an opinion like I was on commission, but I take an opinion that is defensible, even if people disagree, and the
sure.
discourse can be civil. But I'm still always representing Pareto indirectly in everything that I post, and you have to understand that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to shift back over to stop loss because that's where you got started. And tell me something that's really different today about stop loss than when you first got started in the industry.
I actually I did a webinar about this a couple weeks ago. There is a commoditization that I don't think was present 12 years ago when I started, and so with it's the proliferation of MGUs, just the growth in the market. Obviously, GAs like Stealth, we know well, has really just been dominant in that
Yeah,
sector. And so I've seen sort of the wholesale mindset, whether it's internal, external GAs, the COEs that these brokers have. Stop loss starts to get treated like one carrier is interchangeable with the other and one contract is interchangeable with the other. And so unfortunately it's gone down the path, I think, of, ancillary benefits and things like that, where there's 25 great life insurance carriers and it's very hard to distinguish between the two. The push I've seen is for stop loss to be treated the same way, although I vehemently disagree that it should be treated that way. It's just
yeah.
happened. And so I don't know if you have any opinion or insight there, but that's one observation that I've definitely seen.
I think the market has grown significantly, right? There's a lot of reinsurance capacity that's come into the marketplace. There's new carriers that are new to the space, not new to the industry, but looking to bundle other services that they may be providing. So I just think like the level of competition is higher than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the loss ratios are squeezed more than they've ever been. Now, look, the broker community and the employer community doesn't care about that, right? They
Yeah.
they're going to want to go after the best commodity rate that they can get for their client. And
Yeah.
so I think that's an issue that we as an industry have to deal with and solve for. I don't know that we have the solutions for it, but
Yeah, I was
I
gonna say, do you have
definitely think,
any? I don't have a solution necessarily easy either. Although, one of the things I like about what we do is it is differentiated enough that you can separate yourself from, just traditional stop loss. However,
yeah.
is there anything that you see that, what is it, a relationship thing? Is it contractual provisions? Like, how do you pull yourself out of the pile if you're up against 20 other stop loss carriers? Like,
I
what's your
think
insight?
I think you got to bring something else to the table, right?
Yeah.
If everybody else has a spec and ag, a 1224 or a 2412, and an aggregating specific, there's not much differentiation that you're actually bringing to the table.
Right.
And I think people will tell you that this is a relationship business, and I fully believe it's a relationship business. But I think if you can set yourself apart, that gives you some sort of edge, whether it's a product differentiation or whether it's just something new that others aren't doing, you automatically have a spotlight on you that helps you stand out. Because unfortunately, for those that are sticking to spec and ag, 1224 or 2412, they're commoditizing themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and then you end up being a price war, especially if it's a spreadsheet situation, because your eyeball always goes down to the bottom line. What's my spec and ag premium? What are my ag factors, and who's got the best options, right? And unfortunately, it gets distilled down to that level of simplicity when the buyer ultimately makes a choice. And right, I mean, I think we all need to do a better job of the industry of preventing it going eroding to that level of just being treated like corn or soy or
Yeah.
coffee beans. You know.
Exactly. So putting your crystal ball hat on,
Hmm.
what do you think is going to be very different in the industry in say 5 or 10 years? What's going to be completely different about the stop loss and reinsurance self-funded marketplace?
I think tech. And this is a little bit of bias because I came from the tech world at Plan Site and we were doing some of this procurement. But you've got your ringmasters, you've got your three flows. obviously with AI software as well. And that is not just applying to stop loss, but we'll focus on stop loss for your question. The procurement process is going to get a lot more automated, from underwriting to intake side, like gathering data, consolidating it, making it simple to ingest in underwriting tools, spitting out a proposal, getting it to a presentation. That entire chain of events can be done by software today. And I think that will be the norm in the very future. And so the
Yeah,
carriers that are leaning into that, and the consultants, of course, on the buy side that are leaning into that, will gain operational efficiency. And so if you want to separate yourself in any way in a very slim margin business now, perhaps the operational efficiency in procurement might be a way to do that on both sides. And I do
totally agree.
genuinely believe that's going to happen.
Totally agree. Hard to not see that trend coming down the pike. What about in terms of risks
Yeah.
facing our industry? What is something that, as an industry, we should be worried about?
Well, so CAA is top of mind just because I had three podcasts in a row that really covered the CAA, and so especially on the consulting side, dealing with the employers. The J&J lawsuit, I think, was just a signal of things to come. Who knows what the outcome is going to be? But I
Sure.
think it's a signal, and these employers are now placed in the center of all this. So the biggest risks, right, are maybe more on the vendor side in terms of the network contracts and especially the PBMs. They're probably going to bear a brunt of the scrutiny and demand from just the public for change, but the employers in the crosshairs to stimulate that change. And so they're the ones that are going to have to make it happen. So those risks, I think, are more legislative necessarily. You probably have more insight on the actual underwriting side because I don't work cases as often as I used to, but I imagine there's some risk on the horizon that you're trying to prepare yourself for. And so I might almost ask the same question to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me and for us, I think we're really worried about gene therapy. So these are life changing, life saving types of treatments that are wonderful for humanity and they're wonderful for medical tech, but they're extremely expensive.
Hmm.
And for better or worse, healthcare in the United States is a 1 year deal.
Yep.
And getting one of those claims is kind of like the unlucky lotto. It's akin to having hail damage on your roof or your roof blown away. And that doesn't happen every single year. Maybe it happens once every 5 to 15, 20 years.
Right.
But when it happens, it's really expensive to the
Mhm.
consumer. And in this case, our consumer are self-funded employers. So I could see that creating a lot of issue in our marketplace to the point where smaller employers think twice about self-funding.
Yep.
The flip side to that is you're going to have larger employers who probably go bare on stop loss today, and they're going to want to think about some form of protection because this is a new type of volatility.
I would agree. And so, do you think are carve outs the solution? Scale the solution? Like, and we're going to treat it like fully transplant carve outs and have gene therapy carve outs, or what do you think if you had to suspect might be the right way to go? Where are you
Yeah,
leaning?
I think specialty product is the answer, and
Okay,
I won't go into too much detail with that,
understand.
but
Yeah,
here's
yeah.
where I'll put it, right? It's something that we need to solve for. We, as in those that are the practitioners in the industry, we have to solve for it.
Mhm.
If we're going to wait for the government to solve that problem for us, and I've heard a lot of people say that, well, these are too expensive, maybe the government should get involved and curb the expense of these. And I don't completely disagree with that, but it opens up that door for just inviting the government to solve the entire healthcare equation. And that's not a path that I particularly want to go down. And so I feel like as practitioners in the space, the answer is specialty product. And somebody's going to create a specialty product that will solve for it. And then others will bring a comparable market, a comparable product to the market.
Yeah, and I would say, I'll wear my bias on my sleeve for a little bit. You mentioned, smaller employers not being able to bear the brunt of this, or large employers perhaps deciding not to go bear anymore and purchase a large spec instead. That's where I believe the middle ground could be with a benefits captive that has scale, is that you reduce that volatility and you allow those 50, 75, 100 life employers to join with hundreds of thousands of other covered
Right.
lives and then be able to shelter themselves from gene therapy. I think we maybe had three. Don't quote me, but I think we had three or something like in 2022. I haven't seen 23 yet.
Yeah.
So they're still relatively rare events. at the moment, but if you believe HCC's report that they put out in 2023, they're expecting it to triple or quadruple in the next 2 years in terms of prevalence. So
Yeah.
yes, everybody is thinking about this. Well, all I've really heard proffered is that, yeah, you either carve it out or you just wait and see. I don't think I've heard the solution yet, but I've heard plenty of people talk about the problem right
Yeah, I
now.
think
Yeah,
the two main things we hear today are gene therapies and GLP-1s. Now, GLP-1s are expensive and they're more of a first dollar expense. So it's not really an
yeah.
expense that a stop loss carrier or a benefit captive deals with, but it's impacting the employer. So if it's impacting them, we need to have a radar to it because we're going to have to develop solutions for it.
Well, I would agree, and I think we're at the point, man, we just start to have real conversations about just as soon as a new drug comes out or a new application for an existing drug comes out, and all of a sudden there's massive demand for it, is that societally a good thing, or should we look for non-drug interventions or even geez dietary or lifestyle interventions that might prevent
Yeah,
the need to take a $1,500 a month drug that could cause stomach paralysis, right? Like maybe
sure.
we should start asking these questions. And I think as an insurance industry, and you get the demand from the public too, they go, oh, I want this, I'm just going to, insurance should pay for it, right? And the presumption is, well, you keep folding more things under insurance, well, what do you think happens the more costly the risk is? The cost of your insurance goes up precipitously
That's
as
right.
well. And I don't think people always make that connection. It's just, oh, insurance will pay for it, and that's that panacea. Swipe my, ID card, and I'm done. That's not the way things work. And so, if you want to control the cost side, you have to control the risk side. And sometimes we're going to have to make hard decisions about what is and is not covered. And that's a
Yeah.
great example of that's a real dialogue that should be happening.
Yeah, I think your followers know you that you're a big proponent of exercise.
Yeah,
You're a big proponent of healthy eating that, focuses on meat and
yeah,
focuses
yeah.
on vegetables and stays clear of the crappy things that are loaded up in the
I
other
do my
stuff.
part. I mean, I do my
Yeah.
best, is what I should say. I'm not perfect for sure, man, but I think I have a chart or a phone on my phone. I've saved a screenshot of a chart, and it shows the hazard ratio, which is mortality risk based on a condition. So the hazard ratio of diabetes is something like 4 to 5 times being a smoker in terms of your likelihood of death. And so if we put that in
Sure.
a proper context, that is a controllable disease state that can be prevented, or even eventually you could have it remediated by diet and exercise and losing weight, et cetera. So I just look at those things, and again, I'm in the insurance world, so it's hard to
Yeah.
talk about this much. But it's like that's where we need to go as
Yeah.
society. It's not better insurance product; it's better general health of the average American.
No, I hear you on that. I'm going to switch us up a little bit and I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire
Okay,
questions. Okay.
all right, let's go.
All right. So give me three words that best describe a career in stop loss, self funding, and reinsurance.
Dynamic, um, frustrating, and creative.
All right. Very good. What is your one big passion outside of the insurance industry?
I'm a car guy. I love muscle cars, loud,
Okay.
silly muscle cars.
Very cool. All right. If somebody was newly getting started in this industry, would you suggest them to go down the broker consultant path,
Mm.
the traditional carrier slash TPA path, or what I'll call like new school solutions, captives, RBP, DPC? What would you suggest that they get? How do they get started in this space?
I would say the second option. So more the carrier vendor side. Learn the business as you go. Work with somebody that's more established and the product has some weight behind it, so you can sell and make some money. And especially if we're thinking of sales, then go work for a startup, or then go to the broker side after you got some experience. But I think the carrier side is a great place to start.
Okay, very cool. We started the conversation talking about LinkedIn, and so, not professional Spencer,
Yeah,
but personal Spencer. Where can we find personal Spencer? Is it TikTok, Snapchat, or Instagram?
man, personal Spencer kind of only exists underneath professional Spencer on LinkedIn. I don't. I deleted Facebook off my phone. I have an Instagram page, but it's nowhere near as big. So it's LinkedIn or nothing, man. Unfortunately.
I'm going to take us down a tangent here for a second
Okay.
because you are probably 5 out of 5 as part of season 2 these recordings that have said the same exact thing. And there's something to that. There's something to this age segment that is focused on professional aspirations, that is steering clear of the personal stuff. And I'm in that category too. I don't even know how to use Instagram.
It's too
I've
fraught with risk, and then TikTok's a time suck. I don't even know. I've never created a TikTok, although maybe that's a miss from a business perspective. But I look at LinkedIn as very specific and targeted, and I do infuse some personal there. So that's why, right? It's like I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, but I kind of am to a degree.
Yeah.
And I think you can have the best of both worlds there.
All right. So if you could do it all over again, no career in insurance, what would you do?
Whoa, that's a really good question, man. It's actually hard to imagine a career outside of insurance. To be quite frank, I don't know, maybe private equity. I got some buddies in
Yeah.
that world that looks like a pretty nice life, and it does still combine finance and risk to a degree, just a different type of risk. So maybe private equity.
Okay. And here's a controversial one for you. What's
Oh,
your take on work from home? As new people get
ooh.
involved in this industry, we get
Mm.
the college grads, 22 years old. Should they be in the office, or is it okay for them to be at home?
Whew, that's a great question. Let me give you a very recent anecdote that I think would support what I believe, which is I prefer office.
Okay.
I was just with a strategic partner the other day, full office. The entire office was stacked with people, very collaborative. There's a ton of energy, there's a palpable culture. And I think that's difficult in a completely remote setting to build. So I understand why there's a hybrid model that exists today and you try to cater to different demands and different personalities. I grew up in an office, so maybe I have a little bit of bias here, but I strongly believe the productivity and the quality of life and the relationships in an office are better than being isolated at home. Albeit you got to sit in traffic sometimes and deal with a little
Yeah.
bit of downside. But I think in the end, what is it? The adage is there's no solutions, there's only trade offs. And the trade
Yes.
off of me for going into an office is far superior to sitting at home. The tapping on the shoulder and asking a question, or
Yes.
just being, hey, do you want to go grab lunch real quick? Like just the impromptu nature of that. I think if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the social component is right there, smack dab in the middle. We are social creatures, and I think a lot of the mental health issues that you see might be a result of isolation. And so
Yeah.
I would love if it's not going to be what I desire, which is everybody goes back to the office fully, but I would love to see the balance go back a little bit more towards that.
I hear you on that. I'm going to turn things around, Spencer. I'm going to give you a chance to ask me any question you want. Nothing's out of bounds.
Okay, pharmacy.
Yeah.
How are we going to solve this problem of pharmacy spend in general and maybe the PBM's role in that? What could that let's focus on PBMs. What can they do better so that they're not a what I would say a cost drain on society for the most part?
Yeah, great question. Let's start by just identifying the problem,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it used to be when I got started in this business that, 90 cents of the dollar was medical and 10 cents of the dollar was pharmacy. And today, where we are, it's probably roughly like 30 cents of the dollar is pharmacy. And if you look at all the stats on this, we're not too far away from pharmacy being 50% of the spend.
Mhm.
And I think one of the biggest problems with that is pharmacy rebates. So it's the whole incentive structure on who is incented to put what drug on what formulary and what price point that drug should be. And then you have these rebates, right? And so
Mhm.
there's all this dollar exchange. What if we just got rid of the dollar exchange and focused on like the core cost of the product and determined what is the better product for the outcomes of the product, and let capitalism set the price point on that.
Yeah.
There's all this stuff that's happening behind the scenes that just keeps us from truly understanding that. And then obviously with PBMs, they play a role in the middle between the manufacturers and the end consumer, which a lot of times the we think about the consumer being the employer who's buying our products, but it's really like the individuals who
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
these treatments, the drugs. And so a lot of times we're not thinking about that aspect. I know I spent most of the time defining the problem here and not necessarily giving you the solutions, but
Right.
I do think that there's room for there to be a more efficient solution, efficient marketplace. The current marketplace doesn't work. I see what like Mark Cuban is doing, who's down the street from you. And I think he's shining a light on this problem, which that's a really good first step. Let's shine a massive light on the problem and find ways to create more efficiency. And look, capitalism solves a lot of these types of problems, right? There's a place for someone to create a more efficient solution and have massive gains from it by lowering the cost for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think as long as capitalism itself gets to play out and it's not necessarily this crony capitalism and lobbying, right? I think some of the
Right.
issues are, some of the regulatory side and who's getting paid by whom and what incentives do they have to keep quiet or, perhaps stifle innovation. I think all of that's at play. And I think pharmacy is just the industry right now that's one of the worst offenders in that
Yeah.
regard. So if we could let the free market itself fix this problem, I think we could fix it almost overnight. And so, yeah, I'm happy Mark Cuban's looking at it. I've got a buddy, Zach Zeller, down in Austin that does Scriptco with a similar model that even preceded the cost plus model that Mark Cuban has developed. And so, more players like that are solving specific problems of kind of the middlemen and the improper incentive structures, the better, right? So that's why we have these conversations. That's why I do a
Yeah.
podcast. It's like let's all collectively have better conversations and shine the light on people that are fixing these things.
Absolutely. I'll get you out of here with one last one, Spencer.
Okay.
Give us one piece of advice for somebody newly getting started in the stop loss, self funded, and reinsurance industry.
Man, have patience. And I was 25 or 26. I was like, why am I not managing this place or whatever? You have that mentality as a young buck
Yeah.
that like you think just because you have a good GPA or a degree that you know what you're doing. I've realized it's almost like that wisdom is coming to the realization that you don't know anything. And I think some of that comes with age. So just have patience. But with that patience, you have to be consistent every single day and show up. The
Yeah.
consistency is like a superpower. If you'll just be consistent and endure the boringness and all that stuff, you will succeed. It's only just a matter of time, but be patient about that.
Yeah. That's really good advice. We'll close it up there. And, maybe before we close it up, I'll
Yeah,
just throw one piece of advice to the audience
yeah,
because, through this conversation, we both figured out that we're both Gary V guys, right?
yeah.
And he wrote a really good book, probably like 6 or 7 years ago, called Jab, 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 Right Hook. I don't know if you read that book,
I
but
haven't.
for anybody who is interested in getting into the type of stuff that you're doing or the type of stuff that I'm doing, which is really just putting a megaphone on content that's
Mhm.
already out there or content that you're creating. I think that's a great read. And I'm glad to know that you're a Gary Vee guy too.
Yeah, likewise, man. And thanks for having me. I always enjoy sitting in the hot seat instead of doing the interview. So I appreciate you letting me be challenged a little bit and great questions, man.
Yeah, sounds good. Take care, Spencer. Thanks for being
Yeah,
on the show.
my pleasure.